Well, hey there. Welcome to an Ignite Press book launch livecast. My name is Everett O'Keefe. I'm the founder of Ignite Press. And as you can see, I have a very special guest here with me, and we're going to be talking with Adel and about his book here shortly. Now, here at Ignite Press, we specialize in helping people bring their messages to the world and through the most incredible medium, books. And if you've got a book in mind, one that you've written or you're working on, please reach out. Be happy to have a talk with you. And you can visit us at ignitepress.us. That's ignitepress.us. All right, now let's get to the star of the show. Adel Elsayed is a doctor and it actually has a really colorful background. You find how he made this journey to becoming a doctor, and we're going to talk about that too. Um, and he has written this fantastic book. It is Burnout, where the head goes, the body follows. Adele, welcome. And how are you today on this book launch day? This is a big day for you.
It is. Thank you so much, Everett. It's a pleasure to be here. It's exciting. It's absolutely an exciting day, and I can't wait to share it with the world. So here we go.
Fantastic. Let's do this. Tell everybody a little bit about your story and how you got where you are now.
Sure. Yeah. So it started out with what I was always inspired to try to do. I was surrounded by engineers, father, brother. Um, so I became an engineer. My undergraduate degree is in biomedical engineering, and I was so inspired to try to also understand the physiology of the human body. That's what made me not pick any other types of engineering but biomedical. I ended up working for a pharma company, and I fell in love with the process engineering ways of thinking. So really thinking about solving big systems and complexities that require Lean Six Sigma. And I became a black belt in that particular process. And when I started to develop particular maturity in that career, I had to make a choice. It's either I would go and further develop my business acumen or follow a passion of mine, which is trying to treat patients and become one on one with them. And I remember multiple conversations with various mentors at the time, and they said, Adele, you're a doctor. You're a doctor. And so um, I think this is where your core values are going to lead you, and you're going to be able to do so much good. And I took that advice to heart and ended up leaping into becoming a physician. So went to medical school. Um, Various different disciplines inspired me, mental health especially, because of actually the subtitle from this book, which is "Where the Head Goes, the Body Follows." I understood that many folks can have physical limitations, but their mindset could be wonderful, and they can have a very uh, fruitful life, contentment, happiness, and vice versa. You can have the folks who have um, the best physical abilities and fitness, but at the same time, they may have the most daunting mental health outlook and aspects of that. And so that inspired me to become a psychiatrist. And so uh,
Incredible.
years went on, and I have become an attending psychiatrist. I practice in the Tampa area. And so I've never left the engineer, though. That's always been somebody who's with me. And the lens of the engineering mindset of problem solving inspire me to really try to pull on a very complicated topic, which is burnout. These were particular sort of different type of patients or populations of folks who are typically higher performing, may have maybe different aspects of life that they are trying to lead and to do the best of, and at the same time end up falling short. Something may have compromised their abilities to proceed in the direction that they wanted to. And when I saw that, it kind of just the light bulb kind of turned on for me, and I started to make notes and start actually making sketches. And this was 5 years ago. And then as I started to develop a model, which is called the bucket model, which I hope later on we'll be able to elaborate more on. this model became part of my treatment plan with folks that I treat. And so I actually tell them, hey, you got to understand how the life around you is constructed. And then I go through that model, and it became synonymous with how I treat patients. And it was purely validated through hundreds of interactions through folks. And at some point, a discussion was had about, hey, you may have content here that could be written and help a wider population of folks that may not necessarily be in the same proximity as me. And that journey started about a year and a half ago with the first writing of the book, and now it's amazingly published. And so I can't wait. I can't wait for folks to get to see where this goes. But yeah, this is briefly my background.
Well, it's incredible. I wanted you to highlight that because the fact that you became an engineer and then became a psychiatrist, obviously that's a pretty unique path for you to do. But I love the idea that you said you still remain an engineer. You still think like an engineer. You still problem solve like an engineer. And I think that's exactly what I would want in my psychiatrist, somebody who's constantly looking to retool and improve and all of that. And we all know that engineers have a unique mindset. So I think that's fantastic. By the way, I want to make a call out. I see some people here in the audience, including Kathy Fyock, incredible book coach, and some other people. And if you are watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn, feel free to add your comments or questions to the chat, and we'll bring those up, kind of like this. Kathy commenting about your book, um, and so happy for that. And then also, I would be remiss if I didn't also let everyone know that the book is actually launching today. And in honor of that, there's a special price put on the Kindle version of the book where it's for 99 cents. So pick up your copy today on Amazon. And by the way, if you don't use a Kindle typically, just know that there is a Kindle reader on the smartphone that you use, on the tablet that you might have, and also readers available for any PC or Mac. And picking it up for 99 cents obviously is a great deal. Also helps spread the word about the book. So fantastic. So Adel, you're in the Tampa area. You are also a family man. And I know that because you've got to go make a pickup when we get off this call. It is, you know, just because it's an author and it's the day your book is launching doesn't mean you get to set aside your other larger responsibilities, right? So that's
Absolutely.
kind of the way it goes. Well, so let's get into your book, okay, and let's get into burnout. You described and have developed this bucket method, and I'd like you to go into detail with it, and we'll kind of see where that carries our conversation from there.
Of course, yeah. So I typically start the conversation with, we all are extremely unique. Each one of us has had a life that cannot be replicated by any other individual, just like how a fingerprint is. And that is typically built through even before you were born, the genetic predisposition by your parents, the way your family dynamic was when you were growing up, your own temperament, and many other factors that lead to essentially a capacity to handle the stressors that come in through life. And that capacity is basically where the bucket becomes in. So you have a unique bucket that now has been predetermined by many factors that you may not necessarily have any control over it, and it spans to before you were even born. And now that we're here, now let's think about the interaction of this bucket with the rest of the environment. When you are going about your environment, think of all the possible stressors that are coming in to be essentially faucets that are pouring in with different volumes, different frequencies. And so, and each unique faucet has a name to it. So you can say, this faucet is my job. This faucet is a certain relationship. This faucet could be a medical situation. or it could be something of an emergency, an accident, a particular time of year that could be more challenging. So you can imagine the dynamic process when it comes to all these different faucets are coming in. So now imagining this bucket with all these different faucets, and you're filling up, filling up, filling up until to the brim. And then, despite how small the next drop would be, that drop would result into a spillover. And that spillage is essentially a crisis. And this is where burnout essentially belongs. It's the burnout process now that has finally manifested in something that's so obvious for you and everybody else around you, and sometimes may warrant developing psychiatric symptoms or seeing a psychiatrist. And so now the question is, if we were to imagine this model in our own kitchen, you get to have a bucket that's filling up and now it's starting to spill over. What would you do to try to mitigate this particular problem? What kind of solutions can you deploy to avoid this spillage? And through the years and just anecdotal wisdom, trying to think about this, you can think of three separate domains. One domain can be, can we stop the water from coming in? And this is where we get to think about understanding the stressors in your life and learning a little bit more about their characteristics, their different nuances, and more specifically about whether you have control over them, will give you different strategies of how you can modify those different things that are coming in. And then the second domain can be, can I drain this bucket faster than the water that's coming in? And this is the domain of what we say basically is the stress reduction strategies. So this is where we delve into in many different aspects, your sleep, your diet and exercise, and many other factors as well, that's leading up to how we could try to always reset our abilities before the next day takes over. And then the last domain, and this is probably the most challenging one, is essentially the actual bucket size. Is there any way I can get a bigger bucket? And this is where we delve a little bit more into understanding yourself and understanding your own history and doing more of an introspection. And this is where part of the professional work got into is therapy and thinking a little bit more about how you think and why you think the way you think, and rewiring some of these particular constraints are all added on to that particular dimension. And so, and each one of these dimensions is backed up by science, by literature. And so I delve into each one of those separately to allow for folks to understand those aspects. So when they walk away from the book, they first get to have their unique perspective. No one will tell you your story more than you. And it gives you also an ability to empower you to mitigate this particular spillage, whether you're experiencing it now or something that you would want to prevent for yourself in the future.
Okay, several things that you just made me think of. I mean, what you just said explains a lot. Like, it does seem like there are some people, their buckets are very shallow. They're very small, and the smallest thing can result in a crisis. But those people actually might have a really deep bucket, but there's so many stresses pouring in, or the cumulative stresses have mounted up where it spills over. And I'm glad you really address, you're like, hey, different ways, decrease the flow of water or stress into the bucket, create ways to drain the bucket, right? Put some holes in the bucket so it leaks out. And I'm thinking vacation, but you thought it could be stress relieving things, diet, exercise, different relationships, maybe. Well, that might be about changing the stressors going in. But super good. And I've been, hearing a lot of discussion lately, and I'd love to hear your comment about it. And I think your model totally takes it into account, this idea of cumulative stress, where people go through lots of big things, and then there's just this little small thing. Suddenly it's like, and you're like, wait, you have survived this and this and this, these huge things. why is this one thing the thing that's taking you over the edge?
Mhm.
And I think your model just perfectly accounts for that. Now, in your practice, you've had the opportunity to employ this model
Mhm.
and use it repeatedly. Um, how do your patients and the professionals around you respond to the model?
Yeah. So, and to echo your statement, Everett, I mean, it's typically the folks that are doing so much, right? And they end up saying, "I've done my accomplishments have been numerous. Why is this happening now with this small thing?" And again, it's not about that last drop, it's about the full bucket. And so I'm grateful. I've had the privilege to actually share this model beyond the one on one that I have behind closed doors with patients with a greater audience. In fact, when we take a look at the prevalence of burnout and we get to see which professions or groups have the highest susceptibility for burnout, you'll see, for instance, K through 12 teachers. You'll see physicians,
My wife's a
nurses.
teacher, by the way.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So physicians, nurses within the healthcare sector, firefighters, policemen, engineers, and you can also think about lawyers as a different segment as well. All of these different professions have a unique, very high prevalence. In fact, if you go into the literature, you'll see the range is somewhere between 30 to 50% of these different folks. And then there's even a greater research that's being done in comparing employees in the United States versus outside of the US. And unfortunately, the US having a very high burnout rate compared to other countries. And so this just gives you a process for understanding that, hey, there are more to this than just the type of profession. It could also be the culture or the environment that's been built around us that is not allowing the employee or the individual to have a balance, to have a very unique balance. And so, thankfully, I've given multiple talks to teachers. I've given multiple talks to engineers, whether within the healthcare sector or even outside the healthcare sector. Of course, for physicians and nursing staff. In fact, across multiple hospital facilities, this was given, and it's been a remarkable feedback. Remarkable feedback. Because this concept sits uniquely for every individual. Only you get to be able to answer some of these uniques about how your life has led you to here and what things work out for you. What are those different stressors? I can't tell you who your stressors are, right? I can't tell you which ones are they. Um, but
Yeah,
I can give you some examples. Some of the things we throw in there is social media, news. These are different things that could be in the background, and understanding the controllables and uncontrollables, thinking about the controllables to be some things you can actually have direct impact on, and then the uncontrollables, this is where you practice, where we say radical acceptance, borrowing that from DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, where you basically try to be at peace with what destined for you within that particular bucket. And that of itself will reserve some of your energy that's being drained from the stress to be able to pivot it towards some of the things you have controls over. And similarly for the unique for particular drains, there are some common ones, right? So we think about the sleep, diet, exercise, but there are also some other things like habit formation. There are many things that we can say, yeah, I need to do this. But it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to apply it. And so we walk through what the habit formation science looks like for you to be able to implement them. Introspection and socialization. You need to have a unique time for you to be able to reset. And at the same time, us humans require a social interaction. And so, who is this village of yours that you need to develop around you? Because that will also be an additional wonderful drain if you prioritize it. So we
mm,
go into these uniques, and it's been fascinating to get to see what the audience look like. In fact, I remember one feedback. Now that we're thinking about it, by an engineer who's wearing one of those stress reduction rings during the workshop that I was developing. And thankfully, she actually was able to share this with me. On her stress was always like this. And during the workshop where I was developing this model and actually had worksheets and different things that they were doing, it dropped for the duration of the workshop and then went back up again. And
Oh,
she's like,
wow.
"Hey, Adele, this was your workshop. Just so you know, this was your workshop." And so it's been very validating, and I have objective data to prove that it was actually a stress reduction
That's
methodology
incredible.
and conversations. Yeah.
That's great. I while you were talking, Kathy had we had a question in the audience from Kathy, and I'm going to put it up because I thought this was really good. What's the individual's role in solving burnout versus that of the employer?
Mhm.
Like, I thought that was a great question, so I'm going to let you answer that.
Uh, Before I do, it's shout out to Kathy. Kathy's been a fantastic book coach of mine. She helped me understand that this is something that the world needs to hear. And so, Kathy, I'm thankful for you. Thank you so much for everything you've done, for being here, and for this wonderful question. Um, so, the equation behind this particular aspect of burnout is on both. So, there are definitely particular aspects that the employer need to be aware of. And in fact, when I speak about this with leadership and other individuals who are able to make changes to the environment, I try to describe to them that yes, there are many different priorities that they have. Like, for instance, metrics, different success factors, and operational performance indicators that they have to meet. And so within that construct, I also let them know there are so many aspects of the operations that are not built to help the employee. They're not setting the employee for a work life balance within this environment. And how can you tell? And I speak in that language for them to say, look at your retention, look at your burnout rate, look at your retention and turnover. These are different lagging indicators, they're late indicators that typically result in just an amazing amount of dollars, loss of time, and performance when you have to now replace employees. And this is a telltale sign that the construction of the system that you have for your employees is not meant to help with this balance. So, this is where the employer comes into play. Thinking about the leaders, the managers who are having control over that environment, they need to prioritize employees' well being and make that part of their metric and part of their success story. Because at the end of the day, when you speak to these leaders, they are building a culture. And what is a culture without the employees? And so that is part of what they always have to prioritize. How can I make my culture more employee centric in addition to the other success criteria? So that's the employer side of things. And now when I speak to the employees, I say, hey, there's also a lot of unique things that you need to be able to be aware of within you that you have control over. And the job is only one faucet into your world. And so now think about the other faucets, think of the drains, think of your own bucket. And I'm trying to use this model to empower them, to make them understand you're not helpless within this environment. No, there are many things you can try to mitigate and change in order for you to prevent this from happening to you, or let alone be able to recover from.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think of I had an employee many years ago who was just a fantastic person and was a really great employee, but the things going on, the faucets she had pouring into her bucket outside of work really started to impact, on her ability to be successful at work. And it was sad because, ultimately, I lost her because of those things. And she was great. She was terrific. Um, So I asked you if there was a portion of your book that you would like to read. Do you have an excerpt that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, there's one paragraph. I mean, there are many things in here that I'm proud of, but there's one paragraph. If I have one paragraph to read, this is basically out of page 11, and it goes as the following. You've probably seen people carry full buckets without realizing it. Perhaps you've done it yourself. You push through, assuming that this is just how life is supposed to feel. You tell yourself you should be able to handle it. And because burnout often builds quietly, you don't always recognize how close you are to the edge until you're already there. What matters now is not judgment, but awareness. Because once you see your life in terms of the mental health bucket model, you also see that burnout is not a personal weakness. It's not about lacking willpower or failing to tough it out. It's simply an imbalance, a system pushed beyond its limits. And that means it can be corrected. And then after that, we go into the model.
I appreciate that. That's terrific. And you kind of called out something there, like you don't know how close you are to the edge of the bucket until you're there. Yeah, and it kind of makes sense. You're just if you're in the bucket, you're just seeing the sidewall of the bucket. Oh, I got plenty of bucket left. I got plenty of bucket left until suddenly you're staring over the top,
Mhm.
right? And are there signals? Are there things that warning signs that let you know that you're coming to the end of your capacity to kind of absorb and deal with that stress?
Yeah, so looking at some agreed upon definitions of burnout, it really hits certain aspects of life, and there are actually three domains. One that has to do with your energy. So you start to feel more exhausted, more depleted, more often. This is not just once or twice a week. Now it's becoming more persistent. These are some things that are now taken on multiple weeks, and it's impacting on multiple areas in my life. There's the other domain that has to do with depersonalization. You become detached from the things you used to care so much about. So
Mm.
you start to feel more distant, more cynicism can be more apparent during that time frame. And then the last one is when you're seeing there is less efficiency, less proficiency. And some of the things you used to be very good at or very proud of, and they start to become less of what is your normal baseline. So these
Yep.
are the three telltale signs really that kind of hone in on, hey, you're hitting possibly the realm here of burnout. It's time to sit back and try to analyze your system before it goes any further.
That makes perfect sense. So we're coming to the end here. Time goes by so fast. Um, First, as for how people can reach you, I'm going to put that in the chat log right now. And that is at your website, which is thebucketmodel.com, right? And so I've put that in the chat for everybody. And in fact, I'll put it up here too, so you can see that, thebucketmodel.com. And is there a closing point that you'd like to share before we sign off?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And the thing is, this is not something that's hopeless. It's not a helpless process. You can regain control. You can regain control. You can have a much more fruitful, more balanced life the earlier you can recognize it. And so I'm truly grateful to have been having the opportunity to analyze this particular problem and to put it in a synopsis, put it in a book, and be able to share it with everybody within this audience, so that way you can take one step further towards your own development, your own well-being, and your own balance. And at the end of the day, this is not a personal weakness. This is just basically a balance that needs to be corrected. And
Excellent.
I hope you can find benefit from that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And with that, we need to sign off and say goodbye. Thank you, Adele.
Of course, my pleasure.